My name is Claudia Green, and this is She Did That, the podcast shining a spotlight on remarkable women who are breaking barriers and proving that greatness knows no gender. From female founders who have raised millions of pounds, the investors changing the landscape as we know it, to survivors of tragedy who have achieved the amazing and many more. We will share the stories of these incredible women who will inspire and empower you. In order to support us and these women, please subscribe on your viewing or listening channel of choice so we can continue our mission of sharing the stories that should and need to be heard.
On today's episode, we have one of very few female partners in VC. I'm very, very excited to welcome Lina Zakarauskaite. Thank you so much for being here, Lina. I'm really, really excited to have a female VC investor.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
So I guess I just wanted to start off by talking about your early life, because I understand you went to quite a unique kind of school. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that. But maybe start off with where you were born and kind of your upbringing, and then what sort of led you into that interesting school life.
Super. So Lithuanian. Proud Lithuanian, come from the Baltics. I was really fortunate, at the age of 14, I somehow by accident came across this experimental school in my hometown, which was basically set up as a way to sort of test and experiment what it would look like if we were to create a high school that ran like the university. Right. So it was set up by the University of Technology of Kaunas. And for the last 4 years of my high school, basically the A levels, I guess you would call in this country, we just had this incredible sense of autonomy and freedom. I mean, there was no one was checking the attendance. There was no homework. I mean, there was homework, but no one was checking whether you did it
kind of school.
or not. We could do any subjects we wanted, as long as you found, 5 more kids who wanted to learn Japanese or drama for that regard. Anything was possible, And I think from that really early age, I just learned, we had this beautiful phrase, admire talent, but cherish character.
I like that.
And so I think there really was something about, being better than you were yesterday and making yourself proud and having that discipline and hard work to get to where you wanted to be, while dreaming really big and being ambitious at the same time. So, yeah, it was definitely an inflection point, I think, in my life.
But that must be quite challenging. I mean, I don't know many 14-year-olds that are determined, like self-motivated, determined. Is that something that your parents instilled in you, or did you always just have a love of learning and achieving?
I get asked this quite often, and I'm just obsessed about learning new things. Like, there's something in me that I guess I get bored quite easily. So as once the things get, too easy, I look for the next big challenge, the next big mountain to climb, right? But there's probably something that comes from, both my dad and my mom. I mean, and actually us as a country in general. I mean, it's a really tiny country, in the Baltics, but we have a beautiful history. And actually few people know, but back in the history, we're quite a big nation at one point. And so I think there's something about, being small but ambitious and kind of dreaming big and just trying to make it, and I think that's just the sort of the ethos, the energy that I think a lot of smaller nations have, and it's definitely something that I had from the very, very early age. I can't even pinpoint a particular moment.
So you were never in detention or anything like that? We would not have been friends at school or gone to the same school.
I did love drama, though. I did a lot of acting, actually. Yeah. So I, as much as like maths and, social sciences, languages, etc., like I had a bit of a wild side to me as well.
Okay. All right, fair. Maybe we would have been friends. So how did that kind of prepare you for university life? How did you decide what you wanted to study? And obviously you were in an environment where you were probably learning at a slightly higher level than other high schools. So how did that prepare you for university life?
I've always been a generalist. And so I think I, like, looking at other kids in my class, like, I was always sort of good at everything, but not like especially, gifted at one particular area. And so when it came to the sort of choosing my degree, it was actually really difficult because the subjects I did as my A levels, I could have done social sciences. I could have gone into, maths, biomed, I mean, you name it, right? So it was really, it was actually my English teacher, funny enough, who we sort of had that random conversation, and she was like, you know what, Lina, like you've gotta pick something that gives you sort of technical knowledge and like hard skills, but also where long term in the career you could see yourself applying that in a commercial setting, because she thought I was, good with people and sort of softer skills, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
So funny enough, that landed me in pharmacology, which probably from the first, impressions, like, well, how is that really,
You're nothing like my chemist.
But actually, when my goal at the time, I think, was to really learn sort of the intricacies of science, the discipline itself, but then maybe apply myself long term, say, into a pharmaceutical industry or in sort of a commercial role there. So I guess I always I love the intellectual, like, sort of intensity of science and experimentation, and running sort of these, like, reading these super complex papers and trying to understand what on earth that means and how to replicate it, etc. But at the same time, I think I always had this sort of business side to me, where at the back of my mind I was always thinking, how can this sort of lead me to to be able to, I guess, do both at the same time, or play into my people side, but also the like hard scientist, I guess, I'm too.
That makes sense. I mean, we all love prescription drugs, right? So it makes sense. Not all of us, or me. So did you studied in Lithuania, or you moved?
No, so I studied at the University of Edinburgh.
Okay.
I went to Scotland. I had an amazing 4 years there. And it really was, I had a wonderful time there. It was the first time, I think I was 18 at the time, and I moved abroad for the first time on my own, and it was a really interesting personal journey. Being an expat basically, and kind of going through all the challenges.
It's quite scary, isn't it?
It's quite, yeah. I mean, there were definitely ups and downs for sure. But at the same time, I mean, as far as the academic career is concerned, like I loved my time there. I mean, we had wonderful professors, and I got to work on some incredible, like, state-of-the-art research that, back at home, like, we just wouldn't have resources, to do that. So I really, really enjoyed it. But at the same time, life of academia, especially the pace of it, not necessarily my cup of tea. Let's put it like this. So I was growing quite, excited to go back to the world of business and the world of startups.
So did you go into pharmaceuticals after university?
I did a couple of internships, which I think was enough to find out that, I wanna break into the crazy world of startups. It was sort of, the ecosystem was really, really buzzing at that time, and I was surrounded by, my friends, my housemates, launching their own businesses and sort of running these, innovative projects and talking about entrepreneurship all the time. And me being a scientist, I was like, I was just drawn to it. Like this energy and the quality of talent and this sort of dreaming big, and most importantly, the pace, because I really love the academia, but I just wanted something faster, and I was impatient, I think. And back to me, being bored easily, I guess. So then it was about, finding my way into the crazy world of startups and trying to break in.
So what was your first job?
So I was really lucky because I came across this program called New Entrepreneurs Foundation in London. And it was essentially a talent accelerator for entrepreneurial talent, right? And what was really amazing about the program at the time was that it was almost like, it was my mini MBA, if you like. I mean, I had no background in business whatsoever. And so suddenly finding myself in London surrounded by a network of, founders, exit entrepreneurs, VCs, ecosystem players, and having that structured curriculum, that structured programming to actually get up to speed on like the business fundamentals. It was just so invaluable. And then most interestingly, the third sort of pillar of the program alongside the network and, sort of structured learning was a placement in a high growth company. So a startup scale up. Because the ethos was very much, you've got to learn by seeing, you've got to learn by doing. And for me, that's how I found myself at Secret Escapes, basically. And so that was officially, I guess, my first job in startups.
What does an entrepreneur associate?
Yeah, so I had a really fancy title. It was called Entrepreneur in Residence.
Residence, okay.
Here we go. And I still remember, my day one in the new job. My boss greets me and he's like, well, Lina, so tell me, so what does Entrepreneur in Residence do? And I'm like, I don't know. I thought you were going to tell me. Isn't that how this is supposed to work? So it was fascinating because basically my role was to begin with sort of being a generalist basically within the marketing org. So working alongside the CMO on some of the strategic initiatives across CRM, performance and brand, so cross-channel. And, this was at the time where I think I joined just after Series D, I think when Index maybe came in. And so, we are spending like meaningful multi-million like budgets for marketing. And we had, a decent sized org. And so I really got this amazing opportunity to work alongside somebody at, a really strategic level, but also go and operationalize some of those ideas, some of those projects. And so marketing special projects, that was an internal title for me, which I love it because it sounds like a James Bond movie or something.
It was probably a bit less sexy than that then.
But it was really fascinating because I think because I had this privilege of frankly not having a job spec.
Yeah.
I sort of, I had the space of mind to go around the organization and see, what are the biggest levers? Like, where could I help? Where can I add value? And so, we started with the marketing on, all like basically anything from working on, ROAS, like FP&A, basically like financial planning with on the performance spend to launching new CRM campaigns to working on the above the line TV ad, which was a big channel for us, to actually ultimately finding myself more into product and tech. So my favorite project probably from those days is picking up kind of a skunkworks project internally. That was the mobile app.
Yeah.
And sort of launching it and scaling it to 30% of our traffic, I think now, literally from like 2 or 3, like from 0, right?
Wow.
And sort of spinning up the team, like doing everything 0 to 1 and then beyond. And that was fascinating because it's quite rare, I think, being so young to have an opportunity to work in a well-funded startup, but be able to run your own projects, but never having to pitch for it and basically ask for, fundraise essentially, because it's all sort of internal. So I loved it, and having that sort of, I guess, back to my generalist background, like connecting the dots between marketing, product, tech, and then later data and data science as well. It led me to become the head of growth for the business. And I really, really enjoyed it.
It sounds like you really thrive in environments that sort of let you explore and find your own little projects rather than a place with sort of strict process and red tape.
I think that's right, and the sort of like there's something about just the energy of startups that is so intoxicating in the best sense of the word.
It's chaotic, isn't it?
It's chaotic and it's exciting. It's creative. You constantly feel like you're sort of fighting against the odds, because at any point in time there's a plot twist and something goes wrong and this the I mean, we've made so many mistakes, the project we launched. I mean, it's fascinating looking back. But then there's that sense of camaraderie as well, working in small teams and, just really feeling like you're like against the world.
Yeah.
And that it's just, you can't find it anywhere else. It's it's addictive, I loved it.
I know the feeling. And I think probably for most people that work in startups, they crave that chaos and they love using their brain in high pressured situations rather than when it's sort of very still and even. But obviously working for a travel company, we're now moving into COVID. How did that affect, well, not just your role, but how did that affect you personally? Because you obviously were no longer in a situation where, dealing with a very, very busy environment.
Yeah, that was quite a roller coaster for sure. A bit of a black swan event I think no one saw coming. I think it's it's just a testament to, I think, an incredible team that we had, and just the ability to adapt quickly to the environment. I mean, it's not the strongest that survive, it's the fittest, right? Yeah. Back from my biomed days. So, it's really something that I think as a founder, as a senior operator in the firm, like, it's inevitable. It's never a straight line up to the right. That's what it looks like in retrospect when in these beautiful graphs that, now we as investors get to see. But the reality is there are so many ups and downs on that journey. And I think it's just part of the process, and so being sort of focused and confident and sticking to your knitting rather than sort of getting distracted and changing the course. I think that's what helps to weather the storm as a startup, which, happens to all the companies actually multiple times, I think, in a lifetime.
Well, it's all peaks and troughs, isn't it? No one's, constantly on an upward trajectory. So I want to know how you found yourself in the VC world. How did that come about? Did you ever consider joining a VC at any point?
It's really interesting because back in my days at NEV, New Entrepreneurs Foundation, we would all learn about how to build a great business and how to find a startup. But, VCs are sort of on the other side of that same coin, right? And so I think it was probably always at the back of my mind because again, I like to live many lives. So I like to try many different things. And I felt like I did the science bit, I did the sort of startup bit. And then I was like, ooh, what about VC and finance? That sounds interesting and new and different. And so I was sort of really drawn to that. And, I was really, it's a funny story because, now in retrospect it feels a little crazy, but at the time it felt so natural. I went to the founders of Secret Escapes basically, and I sort of said, it's time for me to move on, and I would love you to help me find my next thing.
That's
basically.
quite ballsy.
And they did, and now people look at me and like, you did what? Like, it's like you go to your boyfriend and you say, help me find the next one. I'm breaking up with you, I mean,
I should have done that. Although I don't want any of his friends.
I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it just felt so natural. And again, I think it's a testament to the kind of culture and the kind of people that we had, at Secret Escapes. And so basically, Fred Destin, who's the founding partner of Stride VC, he was part of the seed round back in the day into Secret Escapes. And so Tom and him know each other really well. And that's how the dots connect, essentially. And that's how I jumped to the to the dark side, as they say, the dark side of VC.
And how do you feel your experience being in such a multifaceted role at Secret Escapes, how did that equip you for the VC world?
It really surprises me how small, just how few ex-operator VCs there are in Europe in particular, especially at seed stage, at early stage, where there's no data. I mean, or if there is, it's so messy and it's like statistically insignificant. Your cohort's at 100 people. Like that doesn't really it's just that doesn't say much. So you've got to be able to invest in ambiguity, and you can't just run DCF and that sort of model and spits you the answer. So I think having been in the trenches myself, it just really helps to, as an investor, I think to sort of deconstruct the business in its, sort of fundamental blocks and really visualize that path to scale, which I think is critical at early stage investing. So, I think for me, it's just something that I often think on a daily basis. Like if I haven't done that myself before, I don't know how I would do my job, like, to be honest. But at the same time, there's lots of great investors out there that never worked in a startup, right? Or never founded one. And I mean, and they're achieving amazing returns for their LPs. So there's definitely, that's the beauty of venture. There isn't one way to play it, I think that's what's really exciting about it as an industry, for me at least. There are many ways to be wrong, for sure, but there's no one way to play it. And at least for me, being an operator myself definitely helps.
And I think it's probably a case of, it's almost a betting game, because you don't know that they're going to be successful. And so it's a bit of a gamble. Obviously, you take it into consideration what the founder is proposing, whether you think the model will work, but also the founder themselves. Like, are they an investable person? Do you feel like they're going to grow a business? So kind of what are the decision factors that you look at when you're investing in somebody?
I mean, it's such a wonderful question, because the truth is, at the early stage, I mean, it's a founding team and a big dream in the form of a deck, I guess, pitch deck, right? I mean, that's all there is. And so it's you can try and sort of intellectualize your way into it as a business opportunity and the go-to-market strategy. But the truth is, it's gonna change. Like, it's gonna change over the course of the business multiple times, and that's okay. That's how it should be, by the way. But so one thing that hopefully is constant is the people, right? The people around the project. And so for me, I really spend a lot of time trying to understand, not just the sort of superficial things about, which university did you go to and what's your career path to date of the founding team, but also really going on a deeper level and trying to understand, what motivates you as a person. Why are you starting this project to begin with? And so when things get tough, how do I know, how can I feel that, you're going to be there to weather the storm, and you're going to stick with it, and you're going to lose that big client contract, and you're going to get up next day and try again and try and again and again, right? It's a long-term journey. It's a really long-winded journey. And you've got to be someone who, has the resilience and the stamina and the confidence, and just to keep going, and refusing to take a no as an answer. And those things are quite subtle, and it takes, it's a two-way relationship, right? So as much as, we sort of, I want to make sure that, I'm backing the person, the team. It's also, by the way, for the entrepreneurs to, to do the same on the investors, right? Because guess what? You can't fire your investor at the end of the day.
No.
So I think, using that time to, not looking at it as like, oh, it's just some investor, asking for more things and kind of wanting to spend more time. It's like, use it as an opportunity to really understand the person on the other side, right? And when the music is playing, everyone's having fun. But what happens when it's not, right? Is this going to be the board member that really has your back? And so I think that is just something that takes time. Now, of course, the reality of venture business is that often we don't have the time, right?
Yeah.
Because for the best projects, I mean, it's the founders who are choosing. And so, we need to make sure that we can sort of get to the answers and the conviction that we need, but in a really, condensed time frame without sacrificing the depth and the quality of the interaction. So there's definitely an art to it, but I think understanding the person and the actual human being that is building this project is equally, if not more important than the project idea in itself at the early stage.
Yeah, I guess you're sort of investing in the person just as much as the idea, and you need to see that they're resilient and that they're going to be able to cope under pressure. I mean, it's not, ironclad. Sometimes everybody makes mistakes with founders, but as an investor, I've spoken to a lot of founders and they've had really wildly varying experiences with VCs. Some of them say it's been invaluable and it wasn't just receiving cash. The input was invaluable. And some of them say they wrote a check, we didn't hear much more. What do you think makes a good VC investor? Because there's obviously a very fine line between being over-involved and not being involved enough.
Do no harm. I think that's a great baseline.
Yeah.
Because we definitely see some of the board dynamics play out, in the opposite way. No, but jokes aside, look, I think at the end of the day, there's no one size fits it all, right? And so for some entrepreneurs, exited founders, serial entrepreneurs, maybe they just want you to get out of the way and just let them do their thing, and be much more of a sort of ad hoc support when and if needed, right? And that's totally fine, by the way. Our approach at Stride is a little bit more hands-on because frankly, we just love helping to build great companies, on a personal level. And I think anything is just an excuse to get in the room with the founders and whiteboard and ideate and build. And so our promise to the teams are very much, we're lean in investor. Like we're not going to, of course, run the project for you because that's not our place, but we want to be there when it comes to those 10 to 100x decisions that can really make or break your company, right? And I think that's not to say that we have the answers, because honestly, we don't.
No.
But it's much more about asking questions and helping to, see through the corners and think about the problem space from as many different angles as we can collectively, so that then the decision, the strategy, whatever it is, it just sort of emerges from the quality of the conversation, right? And so those tends to be primarily, of course, within the strategy of the business, go to market, pricing, should I launch a new market, when, how, these very company specific questions, operational questions. But it's also to do with talent and culture, right? At the stage when we come in, I mean, the companies are often sort of on that inflection point from the headcount perspective too. And so spending time with the leadership to really, map out what's the org design that makes sense for the stage of the business. When I often get asked, Lina, I need to bring in a head of growth. You were head of growth. You tell me. And my first question is, do you actually need a head of growth? And why? And what is going to be the role of that person at this point in the business? And so I think it's helping to think through some of these people questions, as well as, of course, very much, operational sort of, helping to close and land best candidates. Because, at the end of the day, even in a downturn market, the best talent, there's still a war out there for the best talent, and that's something that we help as well.
Yeah, I can see that, and I think that's definitely an interesting point, because some startups that I've worked with, definitely when redundancy started to happen, quite a few people said, I don't want someone that's been made redundant, because obviously they were deadwood and the company didn't need to keep them, which was obviously certainly not the case. There were unbelievably talented people who were let go from their roles. What's your view on someone who has been made redundant, not their own fault, and has an open to work banner on their LinkedIn, is very out there about their job search? Because I guess from a headhunter perspective, you always want the people that are hard to get. Like, I'm going to headhunt someone from Spotify and I'm going to make them want this job. What's your view on, I guess, the market in the last couple of years? Do you have sort of a viewpoint on candidates that have been made redundant?
No, the first thing I would say is just it's the nature of the markets, right? So it's just happening across the board, right? And I think as investors, I mean, part of the responsibility is probably on us as well, having funded these companies and pushed these companies to grow at all costs, right? And then sort of, when the music stops playing, I mean, that's a sad thing. It's the actual, individual people that get affected the most, right? And so I would tie this question to, it's similar when we look at the projects that we invest in, right? And it's quite common, I think, in this crazy world of VC, it's FOMO is something that probably has been the biggest surprise to me, if I'm honest, just sort of being inside and seeing how much that's actually affecting the decision making and the sort of the excitement and this glow around a particular project when, many people are trying to fight to land the one, right? So back to your analogy of sort of headhunting, catching the one, I think for me, at least, what's much more interesting is actually finding the projects that no one is looking at, right? Because, well, one is going to be people that, hopefully you're helping to give it a chance and maybe would not have it otherwise. But also from the investor point of view, isn't that the better way? Like if everyone's looking at something, well, guess what? Either it's going to be overpriced because it's just supply and demand, the nature of the curve, right? Or it's just not, again, you're just sort of playing into the FOMO. And so we all say how it's, we want to be contrarians and we want to back, the underdogs and the people who no one else sort of believes in. And so I think we just need to, put our money where our mouth is, basically, and look at some of these opportunities that might be less obvious to begin with, but that doesn't mean they're, not as, or sometimes even more exciting and has a bigger potential than some of the more obvious ones, right? So I think it's whether it's the project, the business opportunity or talent, like often it's those people that, are less sort of obvious, I guess, for everyone else that can really surprise you the most and perform the best.
Okay, so let's get to the exciting part. You were promoted to partner really quickly. You're very young. You're female. How?
What's the secret? There's no secret. I think the truth is it's really interesting because back in my days as an operator, we used to, it's this growth analogy. We used to think about the output metrics and the input metrics. So in the context of business, an output metric would be revenue, right? Margin, something that's very concrete and often sort of, surface to the board level of evaluating the success of the company. What's much more interesting though operationally is actually looking at the input metrics. So whether it's, the monthly active users, the conversion from free to paid, like whatever your business model is, those tend to be things that you can actually optimize for, right? And therefore you can actually move and design experiments to sort of to course correct and adjust. I think the other way of looking at it is, lead and lag sort of indicators. So I approach my career in the exact same way. I've never, back at Secret Escapes, I never had a goal of, I want to be the youngest head off in the business by, in 4 years, basically. I just focused on doing excellent job at the task at hand and, growing these projects and trying to design new, bigger and more ambitious projects. And then the rest, it just follows. Yeah. And I think it's the same adventure, I haven't joined the firm thinking I want to make a partner, It was always about, I want to find great entrepreneurs, back them along their journeys, help them build their companies. And I think the rest, it follows. So that's sort of my philosophy. I think a very, growth hacking analogy to my own career. But that's just that's what I believe in.
I think that's healthy though, because a lot of people, like me, for example, I was obsessed with being Forbes 30 under 30. It never happened. And I thought, I now realize most of those people pay for that opportunity. But at the time,
I was gonna say.
at the time I was seeing people I knew being on featured in Forbes, 30 under 30. And I thought, I have to make my first million under 30. And I don't think you should put timelines on these things. And actually, I think I would have started my own business probably 3 to 4 years earlier had I not run before I could walk before that, because I had failed ventures before that. And so it sounds like you sort of done just that, but doing that has fast-tracked your career by not focusing on, I need to do this by this point, I need to do that by that point. You've literally just focused on, I'm just going to do an epic job at this, and the rest will come.
And you know what's another thing? I think it gives you that freedom of mind and that space and time to really see what's around you at a given point in time. And the truth is, everything changes all the time, right? And so I'm a big believer of engineered serendipity, as they say.
I like that.
Because I think, if you just stay at home and do nothing, of course, no one's going to God is not going to send you something from above and, deliver it to your door. But at the same time, if you put yourself out there, if you're open to different opportunities and to exploring the world around, if you're curious, I think there's something about not having that clear, badge that you're trying to get to. It just opens up and gives you space to actually see what's around you at that particular point in time. When I was in academia, I never thought about startups, neither venture, right? Yeah. So if I had a very particular goal, I want to, get published in Nature by the time I'm 22, I would have missed out on so many other things that happened to me further down the line, right? And so I think there's something about just sort of embracing ambiguity and trusting yourself that you're going to be fine no matter what you choose to do, because you adapt and because you respond to the environment around you and you pick the best opportunity that you're given at that point in time.
And I think, and certainly for a lot of people I know and jobs I've been in, I've seen other people get promoted ahead of me, and it's really, really demotivated me. Have you had that scenario? You were promoted quite quickly. Do you think it would have affected your motivation if you'd have seen someone who you felt was not as good as you get promoted before you?
I mean, the short answer is, of course, I would probably be pissed off,
Yeah.
What the hell is this, I think, so twofold. On one hand, I've always, when I go for, I do some running. I'm not like a marathon runner or anything, but, when I go running, I never have a fitness watch on me tracking my performance. You know why? Because I don't care where I rank compared to my friends or compared to other people in the race. I want to make sure that I am doing the maximum I can be doing at that point in time. And so that, for me, it's you always compete with yourself, which means you will never, you'll never be disappointed by looking what's happening around you, right? And so if you have that strength in yourself and make yourself proud. Yeah. It's not about others. Yeah. Because by putting it on others, you're outsourcing you're giving up some of your own power, right? And so I think there's really something about just staying focused and not being distracted by what's happening around you. And everyone's on their own path. Sometimes a promotion might be a gift in disguise, right? There's so many, everyone's on their own journey. And I think, believing yourself and trusting yourself enough that you're going to be okay no matter what, and you're going to get to where you want to get to in your own time. Sometimes it's going to happen faster, sometimes it's going to happen slower, but at the grand scheme of things, as long as you're going in the right direction, I think that's all that matters.
And you seem to be a very disciplined person. You're self-motivated. Do you ever have scenarios where you work with founders and you're like, oh, seriously, come on? Because I think it's human nature to have periods of time where you lack a bit of motivation and you might fall behind. But it seems like you don't have that.
I'm a human. I do have that too.
Do you get frustrated sometimes when you see founders or leadership teams in general, and you're thinking you could be doing so much more?
My founders are gonna laugh at me now because I probably do it every day, all of the time. Like, come on. Look, I think the truth is, I think when it comes to founding teams in particular, and maybe that's one thing we might be guilty as ex-operators, that there's this tendency of, let me fix it.
Yeah.
I know how to fix it. And I think it's kind of I had to learn, to readjust in the last few years to understand that you're not playing the game, right? And so you've got to give advice and ask the right questions and provide your point of view based on your own experience and the things you've seen. But at the end of the day, the founders are the ones running, in charge of the ship, right? And so sometimes, I still have to like hold myself back.
You're pained by it.
But it's definitely something, I'm learning. And I think it goes back to the earlier question you asked about, what kind of founders do you like sort of investing in? And I think there's something to be said about we often, tend to be really impressed by the intellect and the sort of the big vision and this, just IQ of a person, which of course is important. But if you look at the best founders, for me, it's that absolute obsession on execution. That's what really matters. Because you know what? There are a lot of ideas out there, and there are a lot of people that are really, really smart and have these big visions of the world that's gonna come. But unless you make it happen, it's worth nothing.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think the best founders that I've worked with are those who just have this relentless pushing every single day, doing the right things, and and just really focusing on getting stuff done. And in those scenarios, I just sit back and I watch and and enjoy it, right? Because they're the ones who are usually running way faster than even I would be, right?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of people I love backing, who are just so much better than I am and who inspire me, versus sort of the other way around, right?
I mean, it must be that obviously you have skin in the game because you've invested money, but not as much skin in the game as a founder. So does it mean that founders can look to you when it comes to decisions where you feel like their emotions may compromise their decisions, and you can be a little bit more, less emotional about the decision and kind of be able to look at it from a business perspective? Do you find that helps?
I mean, hopefully, right? I would hope that, when there are sort of really difficult decisions out there, I'm the person that, the founding teams call and want to get advice on. I mean, to me, that's like the biggest, testament that I'm doing the right job as an investor. I think the truth is, being an investor, like we've got, a number of bets in our portfolio, right? For the founders, this is the one, right? So I think having that sort of distance and being just slightly one step removed, I think often can help to, have this sort of peripheral vision and look at things, like you say, I guess more from the, business perspective. But again, I think the truth is, honestly, the people I've backed, you'd be surprised. Like at the end of the day, the best founders, of course it's emotional and of course it's personal, because it's like it's like your baby. I mean, it's something you dedicate your years of your life towards. And I mean, being an entrepreneur is such a difficult journey. But at the same time, I think when it comes to those very strategic decisions, it tends to be everyone's on the same page, because everyone wants to drive to the same outcome at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes sense. And from obviously the VC world has historically been a bit of a boys' club. That is changing and it is improving, but it's going to take time to level out, because a lot of the females in VC are slightly more junior, and it's great that those changes are happening. But obviously you're one of the few check writers. Why do you think it's more important to have more female check writers?
Even the fact that we're having this conversation right now, it's like, what? How do we have to prove that? I mean, look, I think the truth is things are getting better. If I think of the ecosystem, even 5 years ago, I mean, it looked very, very different. And so there are lots of initiatives out there, great projects to help women in tech and women in, finance, VC. We are still far away from real gender equality. And so I think we really need to, still sort of fight for women's emancipation and empowerment, for sure. The thing is, I think as investors, we have the responsibility to towards the world, the future. Like in a small way, we're contributing to the future of the world that we're creating. And guess what? That future is diverse.
Yeah.
And so the more people in the decision-making power that, have come from different backgrounds, have different perspectives, thoughts, their own experiences, and can really use that to drive those conversations and have those debates, I think the better we all do actually as a collective. And, it can be pretty lonely out there. There are not that many women, check writers, as you put in this ecosystem. And so for the female founders, is the same thing, right? And so actually part of that, this initiative that I run, She Wolf,
I love that.
it was actually born exactly out of this, to celebrate most powerful female entrepreneurs and investors and operators, and to get us all together so that we can learn and share and see each other and help each other grow. Because when you look around the room and there's nobody who looks like you start to think, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm the one that doesn't fit in. And then the truth is that that's not the case at all. And so I think as women, we just need to reclaim our power, the power that we have, but we forgot that we lost along the way.
Yeah. How do you think we can better support female founders? Because having spoken to female founders myself, there are a lot of, well, the first one is probably the fact that not all females, certainly not you, a lot of them approach things with a bit more trepidation and feel that they need to produce more results. For example, my time in VC, I saw lots of males come in, and power to them with a pitch deck, no product, obviously pre-revenue. They had nothing but 5 slides, and they were raising $1 million, $2 million. It was very unusual that a woman would come in and pitch without a very fastidious detail. And I think another point on that is salaries are capped for founders. It's common knowledge, obviously, women carry babies, and, there's a period where they've given birth and they have to pay for childcare. And that's not to say couples can't do that together, but it is quite different. It maybe is more inaccessible for a female to found a business because of that risk factor and not having maybe the privilege of sitting on a low salary for the first 3 to 4 years. How can we facilitate female founders more? What changes do you think we can make?
I think it's a really, you bring up some great points. I think it's a really multifaceted issue, and that's why it's not an easy one to solve, right? One perspective I can give is, I read this study the other day which looked at the differences in venture financing for different projects based on the gender of the founding team, broken down by the stage of the business. And what was really interesting to see that the biggest discrepancies start at pre-seed, seed, Series A stage, but then sort of late Series A, like Series B, growth rounds beyond, it actually flattens out.
Yeah.
And that really got me thinking, because when there is no clear data and when there's a lack of structure and clear sort of performance indicators, that's where the biases tend to come in the most, right? And in the context of fundraising, in the context of company building, that is that early pre-product market stage, right? Phase where people are sort of having to rely on their gut feel much more often than hard data, because there's no data or it's messy. And so that's where those sort of biases can really come through. And I think, there's something to be said about the power of storytelling, which, whichever way you look at it, it's just it's a necessary, important skill that an entrepreneur has to have, not just for raising money, but also for attracting the best talent and for selling to the clients, right? And I think it's something that men tend to sort of, I don't want to say be better at, but I think maybe be more confident in. And I think that's something that, at least from what I observe, for female founders, having that confidence, as you say, to go out earlier and start having those conversations earlier. You don't have to have it perfect, because nobody does.
No.
And so it's about being able to tell that vision and share that story in a way that is authentic, is compelling, but also is just rooted in confidence. And in that feeling that, you know what, whether you believe it or not, I'm going to make it. And I don't care what you say, I don't care what you think, because I'm going to find somebody out there who's going to believe in me.
Yeah.
And that's something that, so often I see, founders that pitch to me, and I just wish I could tell, believe in yourself, you know, what you have is amazing, and just don't let anyone take away that light from you. And I think that's something that hopefully with more examples, with more, initiatives like this, more conversations, women can just sort of reclaim that power and use it, whether in, business creation, fundraising, operational roles, whatever it is, right? But I think that's hopefully something that can help and level the field a little bit, as well as, of course, on the investor side, being very aware of these conscious biases, right? And so seeing somebody and not applying the same sort of, if she's not sort of, either it's a classic story of when a woman is confident, she's aggressive. When a man is confident, he believes in it.
Assertive.
He's assertive. Exactly. So it's also, I think, on the other side, equally, being aware of some of these biases and really trying to, make it explicit as much as possible, so that it doesn't sort of affect the decision making of the project itself. But yeah, it's definitely still a long way to go.
It's going to take a while. Yeah. So finally, what would you tell that woman that's afraid to pitch that idea, apply for that job, reach for their goals? What's your advice? A bit of a motivational talk here.
I know what you're thinking. It's like, what if I fail? But oh, darling, what if you fly?
I love that.
And I think it's really something that has helped me along the way, imagining what's the worst that can happen? What is the worst, contemplating. I think, people, just when people go to war, it's you contemplate, what is the worst that can happen? You live it, and then you find peace with it, and you do it anyway.
Or you die.
Hopefully you don't. But then you have the heavens, waiting for you.
Exactly. Be fearless.
So I think there's something about, be afraid, but do it anyway, and just go for it, and believe in yourself that no matter what happens, you're going to be fine. Maybe it's not going to be that thing you wanted right now, but maybe you're going to look back. It's going to lead you to the place where you're going to look back a few years down the line, and you're going to be so thankful that this is exactly how things turned out. And I always think it's so much better to regret the things that you have done versus the ones that you haven't, right? Yeah. And so believe in yourself, find that confidence that is in you. It is in all of us. And don't let anyone take away that power from you.
Powerful. I love it. Thank you so much for being here. Keep succeeding, keep innovating, keep empowering. And I can't wait to see where you go next.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.